What is up, everybody? We're back here at King Film Sports for the NFL Week 16 playoff picture breakdown analysis, and then my predictions for how the last 3 weeks of the regular season will play out, and then seeing the corresponding seeds and matchups that we get based off of those predictions. So let's start out with the AFC Playoff Picture, which did not change dramatically from last week. You see that the Ravens are still atop the conference. They actually clinched a playoff berth with a big win in Jacksonville on Sunday night. That was an impressive victory for them there. Then you've got the Dolphins at 10-4. They got right against the Jets, but still a scary sight in the rearview mirror. Bills get a huge win, and although they are currently the 9th seed, that could likely be an AFC East championship game in Miami in Week 18, and the Dolphins would not like that, so they like to wrap it up. And they've got a tough schedule coming up. They've got the Cowboys at home this week, then at Ravens, and then that home game against the Bills. So it's going to be tough for them, but the 1 seed also is still in play. They control their own path there, as they will beat the Ravens if they win out. So you've got large variance for them. Then the Chiefs at 9-5 got right against the Patriots, and this isn't your typical Chiefs team, but the last 3 weeks, they have a very manageable schedule. If the Dolphins can lose once and the Ravens can lose twice, they could still get the number 1 seed. And then also in their division, basically locked up now with Denver's loss to the Lions. And then at the 4th seed, what a fall from grace from this Jags team at 8-3. Then they lose that Monday nighter against the Bengals, lose at Cleveland, and then lose this week against the Ravens at home. So 3-game slide. They've got 3 games to go. And a reminder that now this division is not looking secured as it once was. You've got the Colts tied with them at 8-6 and the Texans at 8-6 as well. They do have the tiebreaker against both of those teams. They swept the Colts in the regular season. They split against the Texans, but win that tiebreaker as well. So that one's going to be an interesting race. I mean, they all had manageable schedules going down the stretch here. The Jags have already played all their games against the Colts and the Texans, but I have to remind you guys that Lawrence is in concussion protocol. He's been dealing with that ankle injury. Just hasn't looked the same since that Monday night game against the Bengals. So if he's right, they could win out, but you could also see them dropping a couple if they play like they have recently. The Colts have a pretty manageable schedule at Atlanta, then the Raiders, and then Houston, big game in Week 18 there in Indianapolis, and then Texans probably the hardest. Cleveland at home, Titans, and then at Colts. So we'll see who ends up winning that division. I'd probably put the front runner at the Jags right now, but obviously not playing well, as I've mentioned. So then we get back to this playoff picture here in the wild card, where you've got the Browns at 9-5. Joe Flacco has not played great, but they keep getting wins. Big comeback win for them against the Bears this last week. And the division still could be in play, only 2 games behind the Ravens. And if the Ravens lose that Week 18 matchup against the Steelers, the Browns win out. You never know. Then you've got the Bengals, another AFC North team at 8-6. Jake Browning, 3-game winning streak for this team. Tough schedule to round out the season, but they've got a shot there, and they're looking good in these tiebreakers. There's this big 4-way tie at 8-6, and the Bengals win out on these tiebreakers here. Then you've got the Colts at 8-6 as well. Big win for Gardner Minshew against the Steelers at home there. Then in the hunt, you've got Houston Texans winning without C.J. Stroud. I assume that he'll be back in the lineup this week after that concussion, so we'll see what ends up happening there. I already mentioned them in that AFC South race with the Colts and Jags. Then you've got the Bills, red hot, one of the most dangerous teams in the NFL, just lurking here, but pretty unfortunate that they lose out on all these tiebreakers. It may be the case that they have to win out, which would include winning a division, so they could be like a top 3 seed, or if they don't win out, then they might be left out of the playoffs just because of how these tiebreakers work out, so large variance for them. And then you've got Pittsburgh at 7-7, 3 straight losses, fall from grace, and then the Broncos at 7-7. Pretty good considering their start. I think they were 1-5, but they are starting to cool off now that defense hasn't been playing as good. So now we look at the NFC playoff picture, where not a lot changed here either, but the Niners bolstered their stronghold on this conference, and now it's looking very unlikely that they don't end up winning it. They have a tough game at home against the Ravens on Christmas night, but even if they lose that, they could still control their own destiny to the number 1 seed, as they have at Commanders and then Rams at home. And they also clinched their division this last week, which is big for them, 11-3. Then you've got the Cowboys. Although they lost to the Bills in embarrassing fashion in Buffalo, they still hold on to the division lead because the Eagles lost there. So both teams think of what could have been there. And we look at the remaining schedules for this number 1 seed race. Thought this was going to be a thrilling race over the past few weeks. But with the Eagles losing 3 straight and then the Cowboys' tough loss in Buffalo, Niners have just been winning. So the Niners would have to lose 2 games, and then the Cowboys or Eagles would have to win out. So very unlikely at this point in the season considering their schedules, but we'll see. Eagles probably have the easier path over the Cowboys because they have the easier schedule, and they would hold the tiebreaker after Week 17 just because of how the strength of victory works out there. So now going back to the playoff picture, we've got the Lions at 10-4, a big win for them against Denver, and probably lamenting some of those losses over the past couple of months here against teams like Green Bay and Chicago, or else they could be competing for that number 1 seed. And then you've got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at 7-7. Been playing great on offense. Baker Mayfield, obviously perfect passer rating in Green Bay. Very impressive victory for them. And they currently are in a tie with the Saints. They'll play the Saints in Week 17, but They won that matchup earlier in the year in New Orleans, so they occupy the number 4 seed for now. Then you've got the 5 seed. Eagles did clinch their playoff berth, but obviously 3-game losing streak. They've got to get right there. And then a precipitous drop-off record-wise here in the NFC, as then you go to the 6 seed. Minnesota Vikings at 7-7. Very tough loss for them in Cincinnati there. That one drastically lowers their playoff probability, but for now they are winning out in the 4-way tiebreaker between these teams here. Then at number 7, you've got the resurgent Rams, big win for them at home against the Commanders. Then you've got the Seahawks, massive win to keep their season afloat there on Monday night at 7-7 as well. And then the Saints 7-7, they've gotten a couple home wins here against the lowly Giants and Panthers, but they are in play for this wild card and potentially the division as well. And then you've got the Falcons, very tough loss for them at Carolina. Division is still in play here for them, but they've probably got to win out and get some help, so that's going to be tough. Then the Packers as well, they were 6-6, lost 2 in a row. Very tough for them, got to get right this week at Carolina. So with that being said, let's get into my predictions for this week, week 16, and not going to be going through my analysis for all these games. If you want to see that, click in the top right corner for the week 16 picks, predictions, and betting locks, but see what's changed in the playoff picture here. So Ravens drop this game against the Niners on Christmas in San Francisco, just a tough spot for them, but they still stay at the number 1 seed because Miami also loses against the Cowboys. I think the Cowboys bounce back there. So Miami actually drops to the 3. Kansas City, easy game, relatively easy, I'll say, against the Las Vegas Raiders. So I have them going up to the 2 seed at 10-5. The Jags, I have them getting right. I think Lawrence plays in Tampa. So I have them retaining the division lead in the AFC South there. Then at the 5 seed, I've got the Browns. I have them losing to the Texans, but they still occupy the spot, went out on these crucial tiebreakers here against these other teams. And then at the 6 and 7 spots, we've got these AFC South teams. I have the Colts winning in Atlanta here, and then the Texans, as I mentioned, beating the Browns. So they are on the Jags' tail there, but they're going to need Jacksonville to lose a game here down the stretch, so we'll see if that happens. Then in the NFC, I've got the Niners, as I mentioned, winning against the Ravens, getting one step closer to securing that number 1 seed. Then at the 2 seed, I have the Lions beating the Vikings, so they actually hop up over the Cowboys, even though I have the Cowboys winning against the Dolphins in Miami there. So kind of an interesting tiebreaker how that works out. As I mentioned, I have the Bucs losing, but they retain the division lead, as I have the Saints losing on Thursday night to the Rams. The Eagles have them winning against the Giants at home on Christmas, still 11-4. And then the Rams, as I mentioned, beat the Saints 8-7. That will be big for their wildcard hopes. And I have the Vikings losing, as I mentioned, to Detroit, but they stay at the 7th seed there. So now let's get to week 17, where we do not see a whole lot change in the AFC with these division leaders. Ravens get a big win to help them secure the 1 seed here against Miami Dolphins, and the Miami Dolphins drop all the way to the 7th seed because the Bills end up taking the division lead with their win against the Patriots. Chiefs stay at the 2 at 11-5 here with their win against the Bengals at home. I have the Jags winning once again against the lowly Carolina Panthers. Bills, as I mentioned, hop up to the 4 seed now, which sets up division championship game for the AFC East crown in week 18. Then Browns stay at the number 5 seed with an easy win at home against New York. I have the Colts winning against the Raiders at home here, so they stay at the number 6 seed. The Texans actually win against the Titans at home here, but they get knocked out because they lose the tiebreaker against the Dolphins, so that is very brutal for them there about how that works out. But they will still control their own destiny because they play the Colts in week 17 and will still have a chance for the division as well if the Jags could lose as well. And then in the NFC, the Niners secure the number 1 seed as they win in Washington there. And then at the 2 seed, you've got the Eagles now via the strength of victory tiebreaker. They take the division lead over the Dallas Cowboys there, even though both teams win. Cowboys, tough game. I have them winning it at home against Detroit. Philly against a frisky Cardinals team. I have them winning at home. I have the Lions, as I mentioned, losing to the Cowboys, slip down to the 3 seed now. And then the Saints, I have them winning Tampa Bay there. I think they get right and get revenge for earlier this season. Then at the 6 seed, I have the Rams staying there. Big win for their wildcard chances here in New York there. Then Vikings, I have them retaining the 7th seed with a big win at home against Green Bay there. That will be massive, as if the Packers win that game, they could potentially be claiming the number 7 seed there. So with all that in mind, let's head to week 18 to get my final playoff predictions for this week. And in the AFC, I have the Ravens claiming the number 1 seed. I have them getting revenge on the Steelers and claiming that number 1 spot at 13-4 there. Then at the number 2 seed, I've got the Chiefs staying there 12-5, winning against the Chargers in LA there. Then the Jags, I have them holding on for dear life to win the division as they win in Tennessee. Then Buffalo, I have them winning that division championship game over the Dolphins, which knocks the Dolphins out of the playoffs here. So remember, this team was the number 1 seed a couple weeks ago. They're the number 2 seed right now at 10-4. I have them losing out and missing out on the playoffs entirely. That might sound drastic, but all of these games are tough. Then I have the Texans moving up to the number 5 seed. I have them winning that huge game in Indianapolis, knocks the Colts out of the playoffs. I just think that the Texans are the better team right now. And then I've got the Browns at the 6th seed. I have them beating the Bengals. I just think they own the Bengals in that Battle of Ohio, so even though it's in Cincinnati, give me the Browns there. And then look who claimed the 7th seed. It's the Broncos winning at the Raiders here. I have the Broncos winning out at this point in the season. Very easy schedule to come, and I have them winning out in some tiebreakers here according to this scenario, so Denver claims the number 7 seed there. Now let's get to the NFC. And this will be an interesting spot with the Niners at the number 1 seed. In this scenario, the Niners would have already locked up the number 1 seed, and then they'd have a bye the next week. So I don't know if they would rest their players, but I'm just going to say they play all their players here. And I just think they're the better team than the Rams there. So give me them to win. But the Rams still get the 6th seed for what it's worth there. So maybe the Rams potentially rest some players as well. You never know. And then you've got the Eagles securing the NFC East crown and the number 2 seed at 13-4 with their win in New York. The Lions win the NFC North at 12-5 there with yet another win against the Vikings, and that knocks Minnesota out of the playoffs. Brutal there. I have the Lions winning against the Vikings both this week and Week 18, so that would be brutal. Vikings definitely need to win at least one of those games to help them make the playoffs. Then the Saints, I have them securing the NFC South with a win against the Falcons there. And then with the 5 seed, I have Cowboys winning in Washington, but it just isn't good enough. They lose out on the tiebreaker to the Eagles there. Rams, as I mentioned, stay at the 6th seed at 9-8, and then Seattle claims the 7th seed with their win in Arizona. And so we see 3 NFC West teams make the playoffs in this scenario. So with all this being said, let me know what your guys' predictions are in the comments down below. What are your thoughts on the current playoff pictures in each conferences? What do you think the most entertaining races between teams for seeding? And as always, be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next one.